Hey friends, today I want to take you on a journey through resources that I have both found and created along my journey of trying to bust through, eliminate, quiet down, silence this imposter syndrome experience. Some of these are resources that I've created, and some of them are ones that I've stumbled upon and intentionally went hunting for in my journey. Back in 2013, I wrote my first book. Now, I know when I say that to people, they're like, wow. And I get it, because I can remember back in, I think it was 1989, I was sitting in the living room of my best friend's house. Actually, the day she was getting married, we were getting ready for the wedding. TV was on, and I don't remember what I was watching. But all of a sudden, this idea popped into my head. I'm going to write a book. I really want to write a book. Now, I had no idea what I wanted to write a book about. And quite frankly, the idea sounded somewhat preposterous, a little preposterous, and a lot terrifying. But there was a seed planted. See, I didn't think I was a good writer. I really hadn't written very much. At the time, I was working for NASA. And, I've often said in my keynotes and in my workshops that, engineers, we're not known for our communication skills. So I wasn't sure where this would go. Anyway, fast forward to 2013. I wrote my first book, and it's called Girl, You Are Hot: 5 Fire Starters That Can Ignite Your Influence. The audience was Christian women. At the time, I was teaching junior high girls Sunday school class, had been doing it for a long time, and just took a lot of the content that I taught the girls in my classes about confidence, about being a strong, resolute, principled woman. Put them in a book, and I was very proud of that book. But that book put me on a journey to do research into this whole confidence thing. Now, as I began researching and reading more, I came across many books. This book truly changed my life. This book is called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women: Why Capable People Suffer from the Impostor Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It, written by a woman named Valerie Young. Now, I remember buying the book in a real bookstore and then putting it aside and not reading it for a long time. And I don't remember why I pulled it out to read it. It was quite a while later. Maybe, I think I had the book on my desk for 6 months, maybe a year, before I actually picked it up and read it. And oh my gosh, literally it changed my life. Every page sang to my soul. Every page was like truth being poured into my heart. Truth and a salve, a healing medicine. Now, you might think, really, Maureen? That sounds pretty like woo-woo and spectacular. At the time, I think I had already left NASA, because I think I quit NASA in 1995. I'm pretty sure I found this book long after that. Yeah, of course I did, because it was after 2013, after I wrote that first book. And my identity had been wrapped up in NASA in 1995. Now, at this time, by 2013, I'd had kids. I was married, had kids, was a stay-at-home mom. My identity really shifted significantly from being an engineer at NASA to being now a stay-at-home mom of, let's see, at the time my kids were probably around 10 and 11. I got through that tough little kid phase and was heading into the tough preteen phase. But the reason the book spoke to my soul was I, at the time, had become a speaker and was teaching leadership concepts. They were concepts that I developed based on my experience at NASA. I was a manager at NASA, but more importantly, I worked for an extraordinary leader. His name was John Schaefer, and he was magnificent. He created this culture in our world of managers. I called it rabid loyalty. And we would do anything for him. We would walk over hot coals for him, and sometimes I feel like we did. He would joke. He'd say, "I'm going to give you work until your eyes roll," and he did. And our eyes rolled. We just loved working for him. So I drew a lot of my leadership principles from working for him. However, in the speaking world, do you know how many leadership speakers there are? I mean, seriously, you could throw a stone and hit a dozen of them. I felt like the content that I was teaching, I bored myself. It just seemed vanilla. It just seemed ordinary. I mean, yeah, I had the really cool background of being a NASA propulsion engineer, aka rocket scientist, but I really felt like there wasn't anything to really set me apart, set my content apart. I wanted something that would rock people to their soul, and leadership just didn't seem to be doing it for me until I found that book. The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. Forget the fact that it has women in the title. It's not just about women. It addresses men. It appeals to men as well. But I highly recommend this book as a book that'll give you some phenomenal groundwork on imposter syndrome. Now, Valerie Young, who is she's an educator, she's a researcher, she's put imposter syndrome back on the map, was not the one that invented imposter syndrome. She didn't coin the phrase, she didn't name it. She is just one of the, I guess, evangelists of imposter syndrome, one of the most significant ones in our current day. But prior to her was two women actually, named Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes. They are the ones back in the 1970s they were clinical psychologists out of Georgia State University out in Georgia. They were the ones that kind of saw this pattern of behavior with highly successful women. Now, it happened to be women that they were dealing with in their clinical practice. They saw this pattern of behavior, these successful women, brilliant, bright, educated, celebrated, elevated women that still felt that they didn't deserve their success. So they dug deeper into this phenomenon and labeled it Imposter Phenomenon, because what was the common thread with these folks is that they all felt like fakes. They all felt like they were imposters, like they were pulling the wool over someone's eyes. So they called it the Imposter Phenomenon. And they actually wrote a research paper, 50, 60 pages of research after doing all this, studying of these things. And I'm telling you, this research paper is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I've gone over it dozens and dozens and dozens of times, have pulled out all kinds of great tidbits and information that I brought into my content. But more importantly, Valerie Young draws a lot of her content from the originating content that Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes developed back in the 70s. After Clance and Imes wrote their research paper, they pulled together all of their research into a book. And it's called Imposter Phenomenon, Overcoming the Fear That Haunts Your Success. Now, this book would be hard to find. In fact, I don't know exactly where I found it, but when I open up the cover, there is a sticker on it that says $1. I don't think I found it at like a thrift store. I might have found it at a used bookstore. That's probably where I found it. And I know I did not pay $1. I think that might have been an original price back in the 70s. However, irrelevant information, and I hope Dr. Clance is not offended if she comes across this video. But there are nuggets of gold and brilliant ideas in this book. For example, let's see, I kind of highlighted a few of them. And this is something fun. People with imposter syndrome often fear that others are judging them. They fear I mean, it's the core of imposter syndrome. It's the core issue is shame. I don't measure up to people's expectations. They're looking at me and they see something smarter, bigger, more prepared, more competent than I really feel. So there's a measure of shame involved in there. And she says something in here. She was talking about a woman named Carol Ann. It was one of her case studies. Carol Ann was one of the imposters who had always been terrified of failing. And yet, this experience proved to be very important to her and added to her growth. She had failed in her efforts to be considered special, but she had learned not to overemphasize the importance of such failure. This is the key gold statement. She learned that sometimes others are too preoccupied with their own appearances and successes to notice anyone else's. And the opinions of such people really shouldn't influence how she judged herself. I love that. I remember hearing a kind of a summary statement of that similar thought years ago. It said something like, you would be less concerned with what people think of you when you realize how infrequently they do. Yeah, think about that for a second. Another cool tidbit that I found in here is she was talking about worry. She's talking about how worry, we worry that we don't measure up. We worry that we won't get the job done well, or that we worry that we're going to be found out as a fraud. And she says in here, quite frankly, worry is addictive. And we need to break the chain. Break the chain of worry. I love that. And even, you think about what is worry. Worry and fear are different. Fear means you dread being hurt. Worry means you dread being out of control. Now, worry and concern are two different things. Worry saps you of power. Concern does the opposite. Concerns puts you in a position of being empowered. Because when you're concerned, you feel like you need to do something. Worry makes you shrink back and feel helpless. Worry is addictive. Concern, however, that's empowering. I love that. So this was one of my molding pieces of information. And then finally, the last resource I want to show you is, again, I bookend the resources with mine. My book about imposter syndrome is called Pushing Your Envelope. I do draw heavily on content from other authors, including, both of these, but some of the other content and other books that I read, and I don't have them on my bookshelf. I don't know where they are. They're in my Kindle, I think. One is called The Confidence Code. That was a great book. This book here is called The Empress Has No Clothes. Isn't that a provocative, inviting title? Written by Joyce Roche. She was the CEO of Girls Incorporated, which is the new name of, I think it's the Girls Club of America. She was also a former executive with Avon. So she's a smart lady. High-level lady, a making things happen kind of lady. And she chronicles not only her experience with imposter syndrome, but in that book she interviews many of her C-suite level peers from within her industry as well as her circle of influence. So it was a great book to get firsthand insights from high-level people, smart women that struggle with imposter syndrome. And then, of course, another great classic book to read is Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. Now, it's not a book just about imposter syndrome, but she does mention imposter syndrome. And Sheryl Sandberg, by the way, is the CFO of Facebook. First of all, it's an extraordinarily well-written book. It's a beautiful, easy, lyrical, engaging, captivating style of reading. and she is very vulnerable and open and direct, and just, I mean, seriously, you feel like you're having coffee with a friend reading her book. She chronicles her struggles of being in a male-dominated world. Facebook, it's in the information technology world, it's in the social media world, heavily male-dominated, and so she chronicles her experience, even with imposter syndrome, in making her way into the CFO position. Anyway, those are some of my favorite reads. There was another one that just popped into my head. By Amy Cuddy, Presence. Now, she also did a TED Talk on this where she talked about physical presence and, the power position, and she had a lot of data in there. Some of the data people have taken issue with. I don't think it matters. What matters is the principles are the same. You can talk yourself into feeling powerful. You can talk yourself into feeling bigger and more significant by changing your body, and she calls that presence. So I loved that book. That was really eye-opening. Hope that was helpful. Hope that gives you a little bit of insight into where you can find some great, wonderful resources on overcoming your imposter syndrome experience. Bye for now.